and happy Monday. Mr. McCarthy here with the first in our new and exciting leadership insight on the subject of servant leadership. As always, this series is going to be broken down into 4 pieces posted over the next 4 weeks. To be honest, this topic is so transformational, so universally applicable, so in-depth. I could talk about it for years. But in these posts, as you know, I aim to give practical advice that we can all execute. So I'll introduce the concepts and give you references you can use, take advantage of yourselves to go deeper into each topic. And team, I have so much material, tools, methodologies, quizzes. Please reach out to me as I'd love to share. All right, so let's get started. Servant leadership. What comes to mind when you hear that phrase, servant leadership? What is it and what is it not? The world's most eminent resource on the subject is the Greenleaf Center for Servant Leadership. I've included a link to their website below. It's an awesome, rich resource you really should take advantage of. The Greenleaf Center states that, and I quote, "Servant leadership is a philosophy and a set of practices that enriches the lives of individuals, builds better organizations, and ultimately creates a more just and caring world." Wow. While servant leadership is a timeless concept, the phrase servant leadership was actually coined by Robert K. Greenleaf in an essay he published way back in 1970 entitled "The Servant as Leader." In that essay, Greenleaf says the following: "The servant leader is servant first. It begins with the natural feeling that one wants to serve first. Then, conscious choice brings one to aspire to lead. That person is sharply different from one who is leader first. And perhaps because of the need to assuage an unusual power drive or to acquire material possessions. The leader first and the servant first are 2 extreme types, and between them there are shadings and blends that are part of the infinite variety of human nature." I just love that. I think that's just such an awesome definition of a simple phrase. It shows the power of what servant leadership is really all about. Greenleaf goes on to say in that essay, "The difference manifests itself in the care taken by the servant first to make sure that other people's highest priority needs are being served. The best test, and difficult to administer, is, do those served grow as persons? Do they, while being served, become healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous, more likely themselves to become servants? And what is the effect on the least privileged in society? Will they benefit, or at least not be further deprived?" So, I think you can see that this whole concept of servant leadership is so much bigger than how to be a good boss, right? And I also think it's so aligned to the entire purpose of martial arts in general and action karate in particular. So, a servant leader focuses primarily on the growth and well-being of people and the communities to which they belong, while traditional leadership generally involves the accumulation and exercise of power by one at the top of the pyramid. Servant leadership is different. Servant leadership is often paraphrased as turning upside down that traditional pyramid of the boss at the top and everyone else underneath. That really doesn't do it justice. It's so much more than that. To me, servant leadership allows us to move from controlling others to coaching and ultimately empowering them to achieve higher levels of performance than they ever thought possible. And there are 12 core behaviors that define what servant leadership is. So, servant leadership is being yourself, being engaged, respecting differences, and capitalizing on diversity. Very, very important. Super powerful idea. Removing barriers when appropriate, mentoring and coaching, asking questions, holding others accountable. So as per my last 4 posts, asking why before who, this idea of accountability. Delegating when appropriate, a really important skill that's often overlooked. Following up, meeting commitments, learning from mistakes. I talked about that in my last few posts as well. And then preparing future leaders, giving them the challenge they need. So that's, by definition, what servant leadership is. What servant leadership is not is becoming religious or zealous about a particular idea that you have. It is not being aloof, right? You have to be accessible. It is not being judgmental or having a personal bias. It is not saying things like, quit complaining, just do your job, you should know what to do, those sorts of things. It is not, very importantly from a delegation perspective, it is not doing work for others that they are capable of doing themselves. Servant leadership is not always dictating the solution, all right? Or, being the one that has to solve. Again, I talked about that last time. Servant leadership is not delegating responsibilities to people who are not ready or capable of taking on those responsibilities. Servant leadership is not assuming, under-delivering and over-committing, letting mistakes go without appropriate actions. And it certainly is not, this idea of trial by fire, just throwing somebody in at the deep end and not giving them the opportunity to be successful. Okay, so that's all for now, team. Just wanted to start to introduce the idea of what is servant leadership and what is not servant leadership. Next week, we'll look in detail at the 7 essential practices of servant leadership that I hope you will find fascinating and, as always, practical. So please, if you have any questions, any feedback, I'd love to hear from you, and please do reach out if you'd like any more on the subject. Okay, thanks and bye for now.